Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another CTO Craft Bytes event. This time we are going to be talking about how to manage your energy, not your time. If this is your first CTO Craft Bytes event, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the group to start with. So CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders all over the world, focusing on supporting technologists and their leadership growth. Community members are currently over 7,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-to-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events just like this one. Big thanks today to the headline partner AWS for help making the events Bytes possible. I am Emma. I'm going to be your moderator today, and I'm Chief of Staff at a technology consultancy called 101 Ways, where I lead the coaching and transformation practice. Joining me today, we have Johann. Do you want to give us a quick introduction?
Hi, yeah. I have a lot of background. I can hear myself somehow.
It sounds fine from here. I think you're okay. But,
Okay. Can we get feedback maybe from the audience? Because I hear myself talking with a slight delay.
Sometimes that's the headphones. It was okay a minute ago. If everyone in the audience, if you want to put a quick note in the chat, is the sound okay for everybody? Yeah, it's fine from there. It might be an idea if you just put one headphone off. Sometimes it can make a difference as well.
Yeah,
so
maybe. Let's
okay.
see. All right. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So yeah, I'm Johan. Thank you to the CTO Craft community for having me here. It's great to be part of this really nice community that I discovered a few months ago. And so yeah, like a bit of background about myself. I will remove my headphones for now because it's very difficult.
It can get annoying for yourself.
Yeah. So I started my career in software engineering, basically, and I did a few companies. Started in the video game industry, work as an architect for a while, and then in 2007 I co-founded a company called Seismic. And we had a bit of an unusual trajectory because my co-founder was like pretty well known in the tech ecosystem, managed to get some investment really fast. Like we raised 6 million after a week of starting together. It was just the two of us. We didn't have a product. We didn't have anything. And so we went through like this journey, which led me to San Francisco. I'm French, as you can hear. So I moved in San Francisco to build this startup with my co-founders, and learned a lot through that journey as a CTO. Then I did a bunch of other things afterwards. So we sold the company in 2012. Then I started a bunch of other ventures which didn't really went anywhere. Then I moved to Germany eventually. I was a tech evangelist for a while, so very different sort of role, more on the outward facing kind of role, building communities, organizing conferences. And then I moved into investment, joining Techstars as a managing director, where I did about 20 investments. And more recently, I've been involved in the tech due diligence space. So I'm doing audits for companies, for VCs basically, and corporates, and also helping startups to get prepared to this exercise.
I have to say, I'm not surprised you're talking about managing your energy, because that sounds exhausting. Just I'm not surprised that's a main issue for you. Just to shout out to everybody, you can ask questions and comment and things as we go. Obviously, you've got the chat window, and I can see people already suggesting wonderfully helpful things like try switching it off and on again. So glad to see the oldies haven't died. But if you want to ask a specific question, pop it in the ask a question button right at the bottom, and then I'll make sure that we weave it into the conversation. Yes, so Johan, that does sound exhausting. That's obviously, I assume, where some of the inspiration came from for talking and bringing that to the front of mind.
Yeah, because I've been working with, I'm still working with a lot of companies. Like I'm probably mentoring somewhere around like 100 CTOs per year, through the Techstars ecosystem, and I keep seeing the same patterns all over again, right? Like of burnout, people having a really hard time, particularly when they are first-time CTO, to really manage what they have to do and to grow into their role, right? And a lot of it, I think, is due to like some insecurity, but also not really knowing yourself that much, right? Like, and that's what I experienced as a CTO, basically. As I was writing in the abstract of this talk, my CEO was sort of like branding me as a CTO who never sleep. And indeed, for like at least the two first years, I was sleeping maybe like 4 hours per night, which was really bad retrospectively. I didn't know back then, right? Like I just thought that the more hours I can put in the day, the more I will get done. But then I realized it's really far from the truth, right? Like it's yeah. Maybe about the what brought me to this also to this title of for this conversation. When I first arrived in San Francisco, I was looking for an apartment, found a really nice place, met with a landlord, and she was this amazing woman. Used to be worldwide director, marketing director at Intel. She worked with Steve Jobs in the past. And she tried to mentor me, right? Like she saw the young, energetic founder, and so she was regularly writing some notes in my notebook, and little graphics, and I revisited that like years afterwards, and one of those things she wrote in there was manage your energy and not your time, right? And back then I didn't understand it, I have to say. Right. I wish I would have, because that probably would have saved me like a bit of trouble, but then retrospectively I was like, damn, that was really on point, because if you look at energy versus time, energy, you can see it as almost as buckets that replenish every day after sleep, right? And you have this bucket of energies that sort of deplete during the day. You just have a finite amount of energy you can really put in task, and also depending on the task you're going to tackle. Whereas before I was seeing more that as I have a limited number of hours during the day, and I need to utilize that. So that's a very different paradigm, really, because what I learned afterwards was really to kind of like take the task that I can do with a given amount of energy, because some task, if it's highly logical and you're really tired, it's more difficult. But if it's a more creative task and you're slightly more tired, like you might have better result with that.
Right.
So sort of changing, how you think about when to do what and with what kind of energy, like for me, really changed my approach of work, really.
How does that lend itself to planning ahead, though? I guess, is that what you mean by managing your energy? Because I could see that, okay, I know I'm a better person, I've got a brighter mind, I'm more on it early in the morning, so I'll go and do this stuff. But sometimes but do you really plan ahead where you think your energy is going to be throughout your day and throughout your week?
Yeah, I try to lock some part of my week to do certain tasks, right? So for example, on Friday, I don't really do like any paid work. Like I have what I call like my Give First Friday, where I just like mentor founders that I've seen in the past, and I have this one day which is blocked only for discussion, which I really like, actually. That gives me energy to talk to founders, and then at the beginning of the week it's more gonna be for like real work, I should say, where that work that need more concentration, more focus, tasks that, like I have a tendency, for example, to do tasks that I don't really like to do in the morning, because I feel that since my level of energy is much higher, I will most likely do those tasks. Whereas like if I wait after, like, like for the afternoon, like there's a high chance that I don't really have this energy to do it, which sort of lead to procrastination and so on.
Right. And do you find that your energy is that predictable, I guess, or does it become self-fulfilling? I guess the more that you're proactive about how you manage that, the more predictable your energy levels are through the week or through the day.
Yeah.
I guess sometimes you just wake up and think, I'm just not in the mood, just
no,
in the headspace for it.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, like I think it's something that you can learn, right? Like to better know yourself. And I think back when I was a founder, I just didn't know enough about myself. I didn't know my limits. I didn't know, I was not doing any introspection on how I was feeling. I was just in a pure reactive mode. And I can come back to that because I think it's an important point. Nowadays, I do know what brings me energy and like what remove energy from me, what drain energy from me. So of course I still have some days where I wake up and like, you don't feel like on top of the world, and then I'm going to hopefully just, I'm a consultant, so like I have a lot of freedom. I will tackle things that I can tackle and not necessarily like push towards that. But what I've observed, and I think what's useful is really to look inside and sort of like understand what your energy is at any moment. And then you're gonna start to see pattern of what influence this level of energy, right? So for me, for example, like one example, like I mostly don't drink alcohol. Like I might have a drink, if I go out with friends, which like rarely happens these days because of COVID. But I do know that if I drink alcohol, my next day is gonna be terrible. And so for me, even if it's just a beer sometimes, right? Like, so for me, most of the time it's not worth it. Because I know I'm going to have like a really bad day afterwards and I won't get much done. Same with sleep, right? Like with sleep, I know if I sleep, just 6 hours, it's not going to be as good if I get my 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So I try to be more conscious of that. Sometimes having like, external feedback as well can help. Like I have this Oura rings that track my sleep. So that gives me more input on like what is the relationship between the level of energy that I have and some actual data, right? Like I can look at my night, see how it went, and then that gives me like data points to further sort of optimize my lifestyle.
I find it interesting, and I get that almost that self-awareness being key to it, I guess, before you can start to influence it or to manage it or to be proactive in it. It's just recognizing actually where you are in the moment so that you can recognize it when it happens. But I'm curious as to okay, if someone's going to try and do that, what are they recognizing? Are we really just talking about how much energy you've got, or is it different types of energy? What are you
I would say like like first there is an overall level, like how you feel, right? Do you feel like you can move mountains, or like do you feel that today is kind of like this day where it's okay, but it's not that great. But then I think what's even more interesting is, as you mentioned, like what are the different type of energies that you have, which is probably a bit more difficult to analyze somehow, but because it does require a lot of introspection. Sometimes I have energy to talk to people. For example, I am an introvert, and so talking to people like has this tendency to remove energy from me. And so sometimes I would just try to really counterbalance that, right? Like I would block, half a day where I don't have any meetings, so I know that I can sort of replenish that. But yeah, going back to that point, I said before, like if I look at myself, and it's probably very different for everyone, but I do my best creative work at night, like, you know, I would say after 11 p.m. or something like that. And my most logical work I will do in the morning, or also all the tasks that I don't really want to tackle, I will do them in the morning. And during the day itself, like during the afternoon, I will just try to tackle things such as emails, you know, things that don't necessarily require like so much brain power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The work history that you described, so varied and trying to do so much, and it was that moment when you said you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I'd understood it then. What would you do different? You know, your younger self now. I mean, even Silicon Valley, it must have been huge. It must have been massively exciting and giving you lots of energy. But how would you do things different now?
Maybe I'll go back to a point I mentioned earlier about like kind of being reactive. So, you know, when I arrived there with our company being like, we had a lot of like famous investors and we were always on the news. So the startup was hot, right? Like by Silicon Valley definitions, like every 2 weeks we were on TechCrunch. So I had massive pressure to make this happen. And what that creates is basically adrenaline, right? Like I was literally just running on adrenaline, and you know, out of the field to fail essentially. So I was pushing myself really hard. But I think what's interesting in that is that you don't notice it because I do think that your body like is so on alert all the time that you don't necessarily notice that you're very tired, that more importantly that you're not functioning at your best. And I see that all the time with founders, right? Like I think every CTO out there who's doing like a startup can associate with that and really, you know, understand how it's difficult to take a step back and to not be in this reactive mode. Because when you are in this reactive mode, like you're not in the driver's seat, really. You're just reacting to things happening. And there's a lot of things happening in a startup. Like every day is changing, you know, like there's always something new. Something is breaking, you have a problem on your team, blah, blah, blah. And not being in this driver's seat as a lot of you know, you make mistakes, I think, when you're not in that position, when you're just in reactive mode. But I would say that to some extent this is driven a lot by the startup environment as well in which you're evolving, right? Like in Silicon Valley, what I've observed is that, you know, everyone is like crushing it, right? Like you talk to anyone, they're like, yeah, like, you know, we are crushing it. Honestly, that's not the truth, right? Like that's what people say. But if you really ask how they're feeling, and that's I think a very different question to ask than how are you doing, because how you're doing is like a protocol, right? It's like, yeah, I'm doing fine. Like everything is awesome. You know, that's what you're gonna hear. Now, if you turn this to like, but how do you feel really? That's a very different answer you're gonna get, right? Like I do that all the time with founders. Like I had so many founders just crying after I asked this question because nobody really care about how they're feeling. And whenever someone really asks how they're feeling, like they're just breaking down, right? Like they realize that actually, no, I'm not feeling well. You know, I'm behind everything. I make mistakes. I have problem with my co-founders. We don't know if you're gonna raise the next round, blah, blah, blah. So I think, you know, beyond just you as a CTO and how you feel in that position, like there's also the dimension of your team, right, that you need to take care of. And I have to say, I think I was taking care of my team much better than I was taking care of myself, to some extent, because I'm a people person. I like to work with people who feel well. So I always ask how people are feeling. Even though I've been in situation where, I was in such a stress situation that I could not even recognize myself, where I would have arguments, with team members, or like blaming someone for something that I should take ownership for. But in that moment, I didn't really see that, because again, I was in this reactive mode. I was like too stressed to even let emotion go through.
That's hard. I imagine as well, though, it's when you're in the moment, it's harder to recognize it, isn't it? You must speak to lots of people, and you're probably there yourself, where you're being reactive, and you're it's not healthy, but you also have that sense of, if I don't do it, then it'll all fall apart. That there's no way off that. So how do you start to change that?
Yeah, I think you need to surround you with some people who can give you this sort of like mirror, right? Like that can tell you, hey, I don't think you're doing well. I think you need to take care more of yourself, because from what I see, things will go in the wrong direction very soon. So I think there's a huge importance of, in mentoring. Not only for mental health, but like to a larger extent, not feeling as lonely in what you're doing, because I think a lot of young entrepreneurs, they do have the energy, and I definitely did when I did that, and a lot I did, like I was just trusting my gut, because I didn't necessarily have anyone to ask questions. And that creates a lot of insecurity as well, and a lot of rumination in your head, like always wondering if things could be done better, like what is the next thing that's gonna fail, those kind of things. So I think having people who can bring you back to sanity and sort of tell you like, hey, you're doing good, or you're not doing good, and this is probably why you're not doing good, it is extremely important.
The question from the audience, and from Simon, says, how do you disconnect from work? And I guess, obviously, I mean, this is my office at home. I'm sure that's your office at home too.
It is.
It used to be that couple of hours on the train was like, that's the switch off point. Not that you ever stop looking at Slack or looking at emails and things, but now it seems harder and harder to really get that separation. So what tips and things, what experience do you have of just switching off now?
Well, I think there's a few things. First, you do need to actively make time, like to have some time off, right? Like time off is time without the computer and the phone around for me, because if I keep that around, I know that I will always, being brought back to some work topic. And one thing that when I was CTO, I had this belief that I didn't have the right to be offline, and to not look at messages. I think it's very wrong, because if you try it, then you realize that nobody's gonna necessarily miss you that much, and things probably are rolling on their own without you. And if that's not the case, you need to change something as well there, right? Like, and delegate more, and make sure that you have people you can trust who can take care of things. But so making time off, I think is important. Like, literally, I didn't take a vacation in 4. I took 10 days of vacation in 4 years when I was doing my startup. That is not healthy at all, because you don't get any sort of break time, right, where you can think about things, where you can take a step backward and sort of like analyze the situation, where you get new ideas as well, like are born out of like, you know, kind of just spending a bit of time on your own, at least for myself. And so taking, you know, weekends off and having some vacation is extremely important. And of course, there's a cultural aspect to it, right? I'm French, so like, you know, I've been used to like my 30 days of paid vacation is very different in the US.
Yes.
It's a very different culture as well, where like vacation is not seen as something that isn't necessarily good or like, you know, it's all about productivity and like, but I think this is missing the kind of the biggest picture, which is like there's no productivity if you're not rested enough, and vacation is one way to replenish this energy. Now another thing is also, do you have any hobby, right? Like what are the things that sort of disconnect you from your current day? So for me, it's just like, you know, I'm not going very far. Like as you can see, like I am.
Awesome. Yeah, those of you
there's way more on that side. But
we were
you know,
just
that's
comparing music gear before everyone else
yes.
joined. It's an awesome setup. Well done.
So that's something I picked up about you know, about 2 years ago when COVID started, because like just being, you know, at home. And I was like, yeah, I probably need something to disconnect from work. Otherwise, I would just spend my time, you know, on work. I started actually to make music with the computer, and then I realized, yeah, that's even more time on the computer. So I decided to go more like analog and buy some real instruments. So I don't really have the computer, you know. A lot of I think there's something with Emma's computer. It's a microphone issue. Yeah. All right. Maybe then I will just go freeze it. Yeah. So while Emma is trying to fix the issue, I was thinking about, you know, kind of what are kind of advice that I could give, right? Like practical. Oh yeah, Emma. Yeah, I think it's better now.
Is that better now? I've
yes,
changed my microphone input, so I've switched to a different microphone.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes, sorry, we were saying about hobbies and having something different. I guess the other thing that strikes me is that it's not just time away, and you could put lots of energy into a hobby, and it doesn't take. I guess it's not a finite pot, is what I'm saying. You don't have all this energy, and you either spend it on work or you spend it on hobbies or outside interests, because that stuff can reboost your energy, can't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So one thing, for example, that I have observed for myself is that, you know, I like to make music in the evening before going to sleep. I would generally, you know, have at least like 1 hour to 2 hours of just making music, and that sort of like make my sleep better as well, because I'm not in front of a screen. And like, you know, this is like really strong evidence that screens actually disrupt your sleep patterns, and I realized that, like, you know, maybe a year ago when I really stopped watching a screen before going to bed, and I really realized how much better my sleep is when I do that. So the music is sort of like one of these rituals that I have. I don't have many habits or rituals, but this is one that I really cherish, because it brings me back in a good, you know, place in mind, whatever happens with work.
We've got a question from Ben. Says, have you ever tried any time management apps like Clockwise, for example, or what do you think of them in general?
I tried many things. Generally, apps don't really do it for me. One thing, though, that I've been doing is having an app that reminds me every hour that it's a new hour. And surprisingly, that works actually quite well, because I have a very bad concept of time, I think. I'm a very optimistic person, and I think a lot of engineers can relate to that. Like, we are all very, you know, optimistic about how long things will take, and having sort of a chime, you know, when the hour pass, like your clock in the background probably does.
Yes, it really is disconcerting to people. I love it. We do it on purpose.
I think it's a good. It reminds me that time is actually passing by, and that's the most effective way I've seen to manage the time. The other thing that I'm using heavily is my calendar. So essentially, when things are not in the calendar, like, they don't really exist for me. So I try to also block, you know, calendar time for my own, like, not just meetings, but saying, okay, like, you know, this afternoon I'm gonna take care of this, and because I have this tendency, like, I probably have a slight tendency to ADHD. My daughter is also ADHD. Like, there's something running in the family, which probably also can explain, like, the concept of, you know, the weird time warping thing, and not being very organized, generally speaking. But I found that the more I organize myself in a way that is not also too annoying for myself, the better I function. So it's trying to find this right balance between putting, you know, too much, too many constraints around it, and too little.
It's something that really strikes me, and I'm curious in your view on it, in that so you're mentoring a lot of CTOs and you're coming from that experience and that background. Do you think there's something specific about the CTO role, or the people that are working that way, where this idea of taking on too much and being reactive and burnout and putting all of your energy into it, is that something that's specific, or not necessarily unique, but more compounded in that CTO space, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there might be something, quite specific to it. I think, generally speaking, when you're funding a company, you know, it puts you on a very different trajectory in terms of what you're going to learn and how your life is going to be in the next years. But with CTOs, I would say that they have so many things to do and to learn. Like the growing pains are really real, right? Like, because what you're gonna see is in many companies, the first engineer is gonna turn up like the CTO. I was just an engineer before, right? Like, I had some really good skills in architecture, and I've managed some people before, but like nothing that could really prepare me to what I was going to experience, and I had literally no idea about like what's coming up for me. So you start as an engineer and like your head's down into code, and like you're trying to build your MVP, and like maybe hire one or two people to help you on that, and then you get some funding, and things are exciting, and you start to see that it's difficult to manage all those things coming up, right? Like you start to have a team, you need to deal with people. You still have some very technical tasks to do. You still need to talk with like product and the C-suite to like on a product more related basis and business related problems. So there's really a lot to keep in your head at any time, and this is evolving with your role, because the more people you're gonna have to manage, the harder it's gonna get eventually to put to do all of those things together. So I came to a point where I was just trying to do too much. I was trying to continue to code, to manage people, and I realized that it just doesn't work anymore. I have to give up on something, right? And I have really hard time to give up on coding, because I love coding. So I was trying to optimize things for more coding, where really like that was not the most effective thing to do. And for me, I at some point I had a realization of, okay, what is good for the company right now, instead of what is good for me, right? That's a very different narrative. And what's good for the company is, if things get delivered, the impact I'm going to have on that as another contributor on the code base is actually going to be pretty minimal overall. But the impact I can have on people to help them deliver their best work is much more exponential than what I can do on my own, right? And that was really a revelation to me, to move that mindset, which really helped me to give up on coding, not entirely, but like for the most part of it, and just becoming a leader for my team, essentially.
Going to the team then, and moving the conversation that way, I guess we've talked about the importance of that kind of self-awareness and your own energy levels and how you can be the best that you can be.
Yeah.
How do you then, when you're managing and leading a team of dozens or hundreds even of engineers and people with all different ways that they approach their work and different energies, and we already touched on some neurodiversity topics and things, how do you start to be a leader that can really inspire that in other people as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Communication, I think that's really the core of it. Somehow it sounds very it sounds almost trivial, but I do see many companies where people actually don't really talk, and when I say talk, like they might talk about work, but they don't really necessarily talk about anything else or how they're feeling. So for me, what's always been important is to feel like I like to how should I put that? I think I have maybe sort of, I don't know if it's a gift or whatever that is, but to feel emotion, like empathy, right? And I think applying that to your team, I think is very important. Like asking the question, like how are you feeling? Is there anything that is on your mind? Like, is there anything that prevents you from sleeping? How much do you work? How do you feel overall? Those are actually important questions that are not necessarily asked. And also spending time, because it might come as you need to spend time with people to really get to know them and how they function. And so my team was mostly in Romania. I had a team of almost 50 engineers over there, and a few others spread all over the world. But I was going there every 2 to 3 months, and spending like 2 weeks with a team, and really build human relationship with them, not just work relationship, right? Like really trying to understand like what drives those people, how do they function, what do they like in life, what are their priorities, and sort of kind of compose around that. I think when you're more aware of those things and of the specificities of some team members, you become a better leader as well.
Some the concept of obviously with an agile background, we talk about sustainable pace, and you talk about what you're really talking here is real values and principles of ways of working and prioritizing people's mental health and how they're working together. We often talk, we have conversations about that. Your principles only really matter when they're tested, and how they're tested. And I'm back from my development days 20 odd years ago or whatever. I remember pulling all-nighters to hit a deadline, and it was rewarded, it was celebrated as like just you've gone above and beyond. And I first time I ever had an iPod, it was given to me as a bonus for working all night one night on a particular project. Like woo, showing my age as well and having an iPod. But is culture really that different now, or when has it been tested, and when do you make a compromise because there's just something that has to get done, like it or not? When have you experienced it?
So I'm always there's a few things there. First, I tend to work in a particular way where I like pressure somehow, right? Like I like to work under pressure. But what I realize is that it's not sustainable on the long run. So with Sysmic, the company I was building, my CEO always had a bunch of new crazy ideas, a bunch of like partnership we had to execute, and what I found out is that sometimes it was difficult to take a break in between those sort of rush. What I like is to work, intensely, and then like sort of give the team some rest so they can recover from things. Because if you burn your team, and I've seen that countless times, right? Like I think it's all over the place in a lot of startups. It just not gonna work, because people will won't be as productive, and then they will leave to find something else. So for me, it's always been like very important to manage how much they are working. Like some team members I knew like were working over the weekend, and at some point I was like, you need to take this weekend off. Like I'm not asking you to work on the weekend, and we'll deal with it. So it's really about being conscious, I think. And also as a leader to give the example, which was probably the hardest part for me, right? Because I was not a good example for my team. I know that. I was telling them to do things that I would not do myself. And that has changed quite a bit. So, but yeah, it was definitely a learning experience.
I also want to talk about the importance of purpose, and if everyone's seen that the nice little Venn ikigai, that concept of doing the thing that you love and the thing you can get paid for, and the thing that the world needs, and try and bring that all together. Because you find you might have a lot of stuff to do, but it's something you really don't care about. It doesn't maybe it's harder, or your energy levels are much lower than something you're inspired to do and run with. So really just bring in that idea of purpose as well, and how important that is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I strangely felt that a lot in this company I built, because we had to pivot along the way. It was a bit difficult, but like we started as kind of a conversation platform on video back in 2007. I had to develop things in Flash and whatnot, which was really ugly. But uh, but we had a really good traction, and basically we built a community. And like I think what kept me in this mode of being like extremely motivated to make this happen was the impact I was having on others. And I didn't really anticipate that initially. Like I didn't do that because I saw the purpose was great. Like it just sort of happened, right? Like you build a community and then you see it growing, and you start seeing like people's life being impacted by that in a good way. And as a matter of fact, when we actually closed this video service, I actually received emails from tons of people who were asking us to not shut down the service, because like one of them clearly said like it saved my life. Like I was in such a bad place, and I was about to commit like a big mistake, and I found this community, and just like, yeah, it saved my life. And that's where I was like, wow, that, like the impact you can have, right? Like with what you do, can be so big, and that's a huge motivation to do big things. Whereas like when we pivoted, and like then we moved toward more like social media management, I was, not that I was less excited, but I think the purpose was not there for me, and so I could see that I lost a bit of my motivation along the way. And I've seen that throughout whatever I've done in my life. Like that's also why I went back to building communities, because I it's really part of who I am. Like I do believe in the power of that, uh, as much as I do believe in the power of helping entrepreneurs, because I still believe entrepreneurs like are the ones changing the world, right? And if you can share your knowledge, like I do today, and all in the mentoring calls that I'm having, if you can have even a small impact on people, I think that's good.
Oh, that's sweet. I'm interested as well, though, how you cascade that down, because as a CTO, as the founder, the entrepreneur, that the kind of, I guess it's easy to feel at the center of that and that you're doing something. But if you've got if you're then leading a team, how do you do it? How do you recommend? How do you mentor people to go and do it? That message and that purpose gets cascaded down, so that the actual engineers on the ground feel that sense of it too, and are not just tapping the keys, or not just
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this piece of work that they've been given. How do you make sure that everybody feels that sense of purpose?
I think for me it's about having like honest conversation with people, and that's something I also experience with founders. Like I run two programs at Techstars, and I run them extremely differently. The first one I sort of run by the book, because I didn't know better, and the second one, like during this first program, I realized that yeah, actually there are some things that we don't really talk about, like the emotional aspect of things, right? And so my second program, like I managed it very differently, where first I put a lot of efforts in sort of making sure the team is fine, right? Like nothing is on fire, like there's no like weird dynamics, or like help funders to solve them. Um, and then you tackle business, right? But I think if you don't pay attention to this emotional side, you're really missing something. Because at the end of the day, like it's human building startups, it's not machines, right? And you need to take this component into everything you do. So my communication is generally very I would say very direct both ways. Like if someone is doing something where I don't really think they should be doing that, or like I would, or if they are just like, I don't know, underperforming, I would say it, honestly. But with care, right? Like there's a lot of literature on that, like, radical candor. Um, how to say things, but with care, I think is important because you help the other person in front of you, saying, okay, like you're not doing well at this moment, like either because of you're pushing yourself too hard, or because like I can see you're not performing at your best. Let's talk about that, and let's try to fix this. I think that's a very important thing to do.
Okay, just shout out to everybody. We've got about just under 10 minutes left. If there are more questions you want to pose to Johann, do pop them in there and into the ask a question bit still as well. I guess let's move on in the last few minutes to actual practical tips and advice. So the audience generally on CTO Craft events is a lot of people who are maybe first time into the role of CTO or at that VP of engineering. They're really keen and they're eager to go and make a great impression, and they want to work themselves really hard. And how do you, what kind of tips have you got from them to make sure that's sustainable, their energy and productive?
Something that is related to my last point, actually, because I talked about, saying directly when people are not doing well. I think it's also important to say when they are doing well. I think it's very important to show, gratitude or to appreciate the work of others. That's rarely done as well. So somehow, if you really think about it, and you mentioned it earlier with your iPod, right? So being grateful doesn't take much. Recognizing the efforts of your team members doesn't take much, and it can go a really long way, in my opinion. You've probably heard this adage that, like people don't leave a job, they leave a bad manager. A lot of time, because they don't get this recognition, their manager never say, you're doing good, right? My CEO was like that as well. Like the best compliment you could get was like, oh, you see, like you're not only doing crap, which is really toxic, right? Like it's just bad. It's really bad. And it's not very motivating. So I think it's important to appreciate the efforts of your team members. Now, when it comes to practical advice, that's one of them. But I would say really trying to take this step back and to be more connected with oneself is important for me. So practically, it means that you wake up and like you sort of do kind of a quick scan, right? Like how you're doing today. Hi, Johan. Like, we'd like to know how you're doing today. And I feel that helps somehow. And throughout the day, I kind of do the same, like trying to see like I'm feeling. If I feel tired, for example, I'm gonna take a nap, right? Like and I think it's something that might be more becoming something in some companies, but there's still a lot of companies where like taking a nap is a no-go, right? And I think it's a mistake because sometimes you just need to recharge. Like if I take a 20-minute nap, like then my energy is up again. So that's a good way to recover, and you should not be ashamed about it at the end of the day. And again, that goes into this, like, it's more about energies than the time you're going to spend on things. I can literally spend like, 3 hours on working on something and not getting anything done because I'm just way too tired. So just stop it, stop it, get some fresh air, go outside, right? Of course, you're gonna hear everyone saying, oh, you need to exercise. Like I've never been big into exercising. But also I did realize that if I go outside just for a walk and get some fresh air, my energy levels are coming back. I feel more grounded. I sleep better. Those kind of things. So you don't have to practice, yoga or whatever that is. Like just sometimes getting outside of your home or your building to take like a 30-minute walk is actually super beneficial.
My daughter doesn't know I use her swing at lunchtime. I sit in the garden on the swing with the dog, but more use out of it than she does. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. We're also really low on time. If we don't get a chance to speak with everything, you can obviously pick up with Johann afterwards as well. I'm just popping into the chat now the social media link. So if you want to connect with Johann and myself or on LinkedIn, that's good. Johann's also already on the CTO Craft Slack community, so by all means join in and find him out there and carry on the conversation. But just pick one out quickly in the last couple of minutes. From the Intrepid CTO says, particularly about the due diligence work that you're doing now. How do you carry that philosophy and that perspective on how you manage your energy? How does that impact that due diligence?
It's a very good question, actually. One of the things that I've experienced during the last years is, and I honestly, I don't know if it's related to maybe having too much stress at some point in my life, is that my body does react to stress. So it means that I literally get sick from stress. So for me, it's not even an option to not think about it anymore, right? And like doing tech due diligence has this tendency to stress me out quite a lot, because it's always under like very short time frames. You need to get a lot of things done in a very short time frame. So now I know myself better, and I know that I need to take care of a few things whenever I jump into this sort of exercise. Like I would generally cut sugar because that has this tendency to actually level up my energy. I feel less sluggish, like my energy is more constant. There's a lot of literature on that. I will sometimes do like breathing exercise. It's not something I do all the time. It's just like when I do feel that I might need that, right? And I will always make sure that I also get enough sleep. So I have to actively manage my, the conditions that I have, which is associated to stress and some food that I eat, because otherwise I cannot really work well.
Right. We have only about a minute or so left, I'm afraid. I've just posted over in the chat as well a link to next week's event, which is talking about micro front ends, scalable teams, and writing a book. So check that one out too.
Nice.
Just in the last minute, is there any closing comments? Is there anything else you want to leave people a tip with, or what's the sound bite for the end if you have one?
Yeah, I think message is really take care of yourself. That sounds almost too easy, right? But I think a lot of people forget that to really take care of themselves and also take care of the ones they love. I think it's really, really easy when you do a startup to forget about your support network, your family, your friends. You're in that tunnel and you don't really see anything on the side. But people are really important because they are the one who will keep you afloat, right? Like they are the one who will pick you up when you're down. So you should not forget about them and be grateful, to have them in your life, and spend time with them as well, because that will also replenish your energy eventually.
That's lovely. I think I know what I need to relax. It's you doing an audiobook, because I could just listen to your voice all day long. That would like
That's a good idea.
Cool. Yeah, instead of a nap, I'm just going to put on Johann and listen for like 20 minutes.
Kind of in the ASMR style.
Cool. Right. Thank you very much, Johann. Lovely to speak to you. Thanks everyone for joining us. And yes, see you soon. Catch you on Slack. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.